And in that cell, I wrote out my whole, I guess,
business plan?
I call it a fake mini business plan, but it became a reality, and it worked out. And I'm here today, and at CONBODY, and what we're doing now is hiring people coming out of the prison system to teach classes to young professionals like yourself.
Coss, thank you so much for joining today.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
I'm excited to have you in the hot seat, given what you've done to me the last 2 sessions I've been here.
I'll put you through some hot stuff.
For everyone who doesn't know Coss's story and CONBODY, let me set the scene for you a little bit. So we are sitting in his studio right now, due the time, and this is the torture chamber. This is where I had to do over 100 burpees, and towards the end of class, or at the end of class, it was stretching time, and I was done. I was demolished, lying on the floor. And I hear Coss say, "Lexi, are you dying over there? That's not even what I went to jail for." So, with that fun intro, Coss, why don't you say what you did get put away for and your story to how we are here. This is a short and quick of it. We are going to dive more deeply, but for anyone who's about to tune out, these are the important parts.
Yeah, so I didn't go to prison for murder, but I went into prison for selling a lot of drugs. At the age of 23, I was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and was told that I was probably gonna die in that space because of my health issues, and that's where like the CONBODY idea came about, and started getting into shape.
So let's go back a little bit. We have Coss, the CEO of CONBODY, Coss, the Kingpin. Let's take it back to Coss, the kid.
Yeah.
You grew up in the 80s in the Lower East Side. It was a much different scene then. And your mom, it was just you and your mom in the beginning. She was 6 months pregnant when she came from the Dominican Republic. So walk us through your experiences and how that shaped you.
Yeah, so my mom immigrated over here in the mid '80s. She was pregnant with me, and I ended up in the Lower East Side, where it was a heavily drug infested neighborhood. It was the norm. I mean, I remember seeing people lining up down Rivington Street to buy drugs. It was insane to think about it now. When you see stuff like that, you really don't see stuff like that. But for me, it was like, oh, people just buying stuff, as a kid, and I'm seeing like older cousins or, neighbors or people that I knew from the neighborhood, dealing and selling drugs and making money and having cars and chains, and and that's what I thought was success. So as a kid, when people would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would tell them I wanted to be rich. And I got into the world of drugs pretty quickly. At 11, I started smoking weed, and from there, it started escalating. I started dealing weed and selling coke and crack on the corner over here on Broome and Eldridge. But it was definitely a different neighborhood back then. I felt like the Lower East Side was more of a community, even though it's still a community today, but it was more of a community back then, but dangerous. And now it's like less dangerous, but community. Less of a community, So, but it was like a place where, my mom would leave me on the street, and she would know that somebody's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go to the park and I'll be out there by myself, till late at night. And, I'm with like 20 other kids from the neighborhood, so.
Back before iPhones and iPads, you guys played outside.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
And what did your mom do?
So my mom had multiple jobs. She worked at a factory sewing little small dresses for like babies. And back then also she sold... it was like an Avon product, but it was called Jafra.
Yeah.
And she sold like lotion and all that stuff. It was pretty embarrassing when she would stop random people and put lotion on them.
Well, that's hustling.
Yeah.
Maybe I think I see where it comes from.
I got some of it from her, for sure.
You started hustling at a young age. It was more legal then, and it got progressively more illegal. Absolutely. But walk us through when you were a kid and you like sell cans or stuff at your local bodega.
I wouldn't sell the cans, but I guess I would sell them. I would just exchange them.
Yeah.
But I just knew that I was always money hungry. I would get baseball cards, sell them, trade them, I don't know. I was collecting like bottles of beers and cans from like all the neighbors in my building because I knew everybody drank, and I will like be the kid coming down the stairs with a big ass garbage bag, excuse my language, and trading them for nickels in the bodega, and that was like my first hustle, and then opening up the fire hydrant on the block. You don't see that anymore downtown, but like back in the day, we used to like every block had a fire hydrant. We would like flood the streets, like Hurricane Henry had nothing on, the fire hydrant openings. But it was a crazy time. It was different, and it was, I don't know. For me, it was fun. It was fun. I do regret doing horrible things that I did back in the day, but when I was a kid, I had a lot of fun.
What did other kids your age do? Were any of them similarly hustling? Or were they just playing the sandbox and you were making
That
deals?
Well, there was no sandboxes over here. I mean, all we had was like concrete turf. I mean, we just play basketball, baseball in the park, and that's what we did. But I was always like the one getting it. I don't know. I just had this money hungry feeling. I guess because like my mom had nothing and she would like deny me stuff and blame it on the fact that she didn't have money.
Yeah.
And so that used to make me angry and I wanted to get it, and I felt like other kids, when they asked their parents stuff, they got it for them, and that was like my purpose of like going to get it myself and not dealing with anybody else.
You became self-reliant very early on.
Definitely, and I was jealous of the kids that had stuff. I would see the kids coming with the new Jordans to school, and I'm coming with the lighting up LA Gears, that from Payless, and that was embarrassing. That was embarrassing.
So you said you played sports as a kid. Were you competitive? Did you play a lot of sports?
Yeah. I played soccer, baseball, basketball, football. I mean, I played anything that you could play. I loved any type of sport back then.
That's going to be notable for later on. But yeah, that's interesting that as a kid, you love sports. And in school, you were good at school?
Yeah, I was really good at school. I remember getting like straight A. I mean, school was really easy for me. My mom was actually a teacher in the Dominican Republic,
Oh,
and so I learned my times tables like, I don't know, first grade.
I still haven't learned my times tables.
Yeah, it's like I just knew, like she taught me so much, like even before going to school, and reading books and all that stuff. And so when I went, I was just so advanced that I was like, whatever, I'm not paying attention, and I just didn't really care.
Were you the kind of smart kid who just did the work when he felt like it? Or were you the smart kid who just always had his homework done?
I did my work. I think in elementary school, like I always like did what I could. But when it came to middle school, I was in the streets, and my mind was like involved already out there, and that was it.
So walk us through the progression of how you started smoking weed at 11 and walk us through then from when you eventually came to sell the drugs.
Yeah, so I started smoking at 11, and I remember kids in my school would, back then all we could afford was like a nickel bag. A nickel bag was a $5 bag, and so everybody would like chip in $1 here and there, and I would just go buy a Philly for a quarter back then, and I would be the one like going down the block to my cousin, like, yo, let me get a bag, and I'm rolling up the blunt, and it's like 5 of us on a blunt, and that's how we did it, and it became like more of a supply and demand for me because I was just like the middleman, like going back and forth, and so one summer I saved up $100. I was 12 or 13 at that time, and then I decided to buy an ounce with it, and off of that ounce I made almost $300.
It's a good return.
Yeah.
And you progressed from weed to cocaine. So Tell us a story from how you went from there to making $2 million at the height of
Yeah, I
your
mean,
success.
I got introduced to the world of cocaine pretty quickly. I already been around it. It was in my face all the time. So like, I would there was a corner bodega where everybody stood in front of, and the guys used to sell over there, and I always had weed to sell. And so I remember like I was the only person on the block at that time, and somebody came to buy 2 bags of coke, and I was like, I don't got it. The guy's gonna come back, and and he was like, I need it right now. Like he was putting a little bit of pressure. Or he's like, I'm gonna be out. I'm gonna go somewhere else. So I was like, all right, hold up, let me get that money. I'll get it for you. And so he gave me the money. I went down the block. I made a profit off of that, and I just got involved at that point. And it was just like I was always on the corner, and I don't know. I started like a 24-hour like block post. I don't know. I was always on a milk crate on a corner. It was not a milk crate challenge, like I just found out. It was just like me sitting on the block and not wasting any time. And back then I had a beeper, and I had the payphone on the block. So basically, like if somebody's beeping me, I'm using the payphone, tell them meet me on the corner. And that's how it worked. Or people just walked up to the corner and found that I was there all the time. And so I felt like if I left the corner, I was going to miss $1.
Yeah.
And so I slept on that corner. I used the bathroom on the corner, brushed my teeth on the corner. I like did everything because I didn't want to miss that sale.
At 23 years old, you get caught, right?
Yeah, I got caught at 23 years old for running one of the largest drug delivery services in New York City. From like me selling on the corner, it became I don't know, the neighborhood changed, and my whole target market changed. Instead of me like selling coke and crack on the corner, now I'm like selling to like these like hipster kids that were moving from all over the country to the neighborhood. It was not something that I've never seen before, and they wanted a party. And a lot of people in my neighborhood were scared to even talk to them because they thought everybody that was white that was using drugs
Or
or that
cops.
were cops. So I was the person that was like, "Are you guys are idiots? I'm gonna sell drugs to them."
It's a whole target market.
Yeah, it's a
you're
whole
not
different.
accessing.
Yeah, exactly, and that was my mentality behind it. And so I took it over, and I made up like these business cards alongside of my boy Joey at the time, and we did not stop hustling. It was just crazy.
So this was all day, all night.
All day, all night. We were staying up for like 3-4 days at a time, just because we didn't want to miss an opportunity.
And when did your family know that you were doing this? Did they know from the beginning, or they
Yeah, I
found
mean,
out?
my family knew when I was a kid. I got arrested at 13 years old for selling weed on the block, and I remember like the cops called my mom, and they told them, and so I mean they knew back then. Like my mom definitely didn't want me to like sell drugs or anything, and my dad was like, nobody was promoting me to like,
Yeah.
hey, be out there, but my dad was also saying like, hey, just be careful,
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna, I can't stop. What are you doing? Like, what am I gonna do? Call the cops on you? So
Yeah.
he was not gonna do that, but he just told me just watch out, and be careful. And so
And so being careful led to being in jail, 23, that's when you got 7 years.
yep,
And you were told going in that you had 5 years to live.
yep.
So that math was not in your favor.
Yeah, when I went in, that's when I first got like any doctor checkup in so long.
Yeah.
Like the physician there, when they took my blood and they called me back to the medical unit in about 2 weeks after that, it surprised me because I was like, I'm 20 at the time. I was 24 years old when I first got the news, and they said I had about 5 years to live, and I was like shaken up, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm not gonna die. I'm only 24,
I'm
you know?
invincible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think that, you know, I knew I was out of shape. I was
Yeah.
a little bit heavier and, but I knew that I was smoking, drinking, and eating like just straight street food back then when I was in the street. So my diet and my mobility was like nowhere to be found. I was just not moving when I was in the streets. I was literally sitting on a car or sitting on a corner all the time.
So you started working out in prison and you got made fun of a lot.
Yeah, I mean, not that much. But I did get made fun of a few times, you know.
They call you Fat Forrest.
Yeah, they called me Fat Forrest Gump when I was running the yard.
It's clever. It's sad, but clever.
Yeah. So in Green, there's the box. The box is solitary confinement units, and so you have like the box right there in front of the regular yard, and so it's facing the yard, and there's people that go out to their cages. So when you're in solitary confinement, you have a cage that you step out to, and you see everybody in the yard. And so there was guys that were on their cages, and they were just screaming at me, making fun of me, and I'm literally like running with my middle finger up, you know, just not caring, just moving, and that's what I did. You know, I had the mentality that if I needed to lose the weight, I needed to dedicate the time.
Did you always have the mindset where if I put my mind to it, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the only time that I could fail is if I stopped doing it,
Yeah.
you know, whether if I'm like striving a next step or one step or just baby crawling over, like, you know, I'm getting something done, you know.
And I thought that when you received basically 5 years you're going to die, that's when you decided to change your whole life. But this was like part one of the lifestyle change. Part two, when you decided I'm not going to do the drug scene anymore when I come back, when did that point come?
So that was towards the end of my incarceration. And so while I was incarcerated,
And this is 7 years.
yeah.
Or it got shortened to 4 years?
Yeah. So in prison unit, you really never do your whole full time. Everything. So 7 years is 70 months if you max out. So it's like 10 months a year. Sometimes there's other prisons that count their years 6 months a year or 8 months a year. It's a whole different calculation. But you could technically do your full 7 years if you max out and if you do something crazy. So like 3 years into my bid, I was about to come home and on an early release program. So I was going to do half of my time. It's like 35 months at that time. And yeah, I was about to be released. And that's when like I really changed my mentality because I ended up in this altercation with an officer that ended me in leading up to solitary confinement. So I was in a 24-hour lockdown space where I couldn't speak to anybody. I couldn't do anything, you know. And basically, the officer searched me aggressively, and
This is during the shock program.
During the shock
which is
program,
taught by ex-Marines.
Yeah. Ex-Marines, military people. Yeah, so it's a program that very strict. You're waking up in the morning, you're getting dressed, making your bed, shaving, brushing teeth. You got 8 minutes to be ready to go outside, and then you're working out for about an hour and a half.
But you get to go home early.
You get to go home early. So
and you had a son who was, how old was he at that point? 7?
Yeah, my son at that time was towards the end of my incarceration. He must have been like 5 years old.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so facing not being able to go back early.
Yeah, it was devastating because like, you know, I felt I was not wrong in that situation. The officer basically said I was attempting to assault him.
Yeah.
And I was disobeying a direct order, and I didn't do anything like that. And he placed me in solitary where I was like facing the rest of my years in prison. So I was facing another 3 years behind this situation. And I could have ended up in solitary confinement for maybe a couple years behind that, or a new charge. I don't know. And so at that time, I was devastated at the fact that I couldn't go home. My son at the time was around 5, and I didn't want to like continue being a dad that is raising that kid behind bars. I remember like teaching him his ABCs on a payphone in there, and
Yeah.
it's just when you become a parent, like there's no other feeling like that, like you really feel it in your core, like you feel it in your heart, the pain that you cause your child if you're doing something wrong to them, so it's something that I regretted. And at that time while I was in solitary, I remember like being in there not doing anything, and all I could do is write letters, read, and that was it, and work out. And I remember writing this huge letter to my family, letting them know I'm not coming home because of this altercation. And then I realized I had no stamp to send out this letter with, because you don't get a stamp when you're in solitary until 30 days in the box. And so I'm like frustrated. I'm supposed to go home in like 60 days, and I couldn't go home, and I couldn't communicate to get any help from anybody from the outside world. So I remember my sister, she finds out I'm in solitary because I was constantly calling home. They knew that something was wrong because they didn't hear from me. And so my sister calls up the prison. She finds out that I'm in solitary. And she was like, didn't really tell her what I did, but she wrote me a letter and says, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. And my sister's like, I call her Mother Teresa's child. She's like super religious, and she writes me a letter and says, read Psalm 91 from the Bible, that everything's gonna be okay. And I remember getting that letter, reading it, and I like was like whatever. And I took that letter and threw it in the corner of my cell, and I didn't care about anything but to get some sort of assistance on that case. And a couple days went by. I was sitting in that cell, not doing anything, bored out of my mind, and I decided to pick up the Bible, this Bible that she gave me early on in my incarceration. So when you're in solitary, the only thing that follows you around is your religious items, your Quran, your Bible, your Torah, whatever your religious beliefs are. And so I had the Bible there and never opened it up, and I decided to read Psalm 91. And as soon as I read Psalm 91, that said, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my shelter and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Stamp fell out of my Bible.
Wow.
And that stamp like gave me chills. And for the first time, I guess I felt like there was something bigger than myself. And I don't know. It really, I guess it humbled me, and then I began reading the Bible from front to back, and I started realizing what I was doing was wrong.
Yeah.
That I was not only affecting my son, my family, but the thousands of people I sold drugs to and their families.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give back in some sort of way. And I was already helping the inmates in the yard get fit, work out. I helped over 20 inmates. It was over 1,000 pounds combined before the box. And so that's what I did. I came up with a plan, and in that cell, I wrote out my whole, I guess,
Business plan?
I call it a fake mini business plan, but it became a reality, and it worked out, and I'm here today, and at CONBODY, and what we're doing now is hiring people coming out of the prison system to teach classes to young professionals like yourself.
So did your family believe that you were totally changing your ways when you came out of prison?
Absolutely not. My family, didn't believe me. I mean, I've told them time and time again, when I came out of like juvie, and I did another year when I was 19.
It was always this time.
And yeah, it was just like, even my parole officer, I had the same parole officer when I came home, and she was like, heard it all before, like, you'll be back, and doubted me. But I told them I was going to prove it to them. And I was out in the park every single day, just showing up twice a day. And then I was like cleaning apartments. I was just doing anything to get money because I really couldn't find a job when I came home. And that was the biggest issue was like it was frustrating at the fact that I kept getting denied and denied and denied, but I kept picking up side gigs. If somebody needed me to move something or pick up something or do anything, but I continued showing up twice a day to the park. I would show up at 6 in the morning, and I would show up like at 5:36 at night and do workouts in the park. And I did that for 2 years until I had like a small little following, and from there. I managed to like save enough money, raise enough money, and I opened up our first location on the exact same corner where I sold drugs at.
Full circle.
Yeah, it was the only place that accepted me because every real estate property that I applied to denied me because of my record. And so there was this small little basement under a Buddhist temple, and the lady of the building, the owner, she was very Buddhist, believed in like second chances, loved what I was doing, and she said she was going to give me a chance. And from there, we outgrew that space, and then we came here.
Amazing. If you had the opportunity to talk to yourself when you were 16, 17, 18, 19, what is something that you would say?
I don't know. I would say like there's other ways, but maybe somebody told me that when I was a kid back then too. And I just think like when you're not fully grown and you have that mentality and you think you're grown, you're gonna just do whatever you think is right or wrong, whatever. Like you don't really care about the consequences. And so it's hard for me to like talk to a kid and change his life or change his mindset.
Yeah.
All I could do is share my experiences and my story. Today
Which is what you do.
Yeah, today this is what happened to me, and if you want to lead down that path, that's your decision. But this is what you're gonna probably be facing. Which is not fun.
Yeah. When we talk about wanting to change people, it's you can do your best to give them wisdom, but you can't change someone. They have to change themselves. And you went through many years going through that change, and it worked out so well for you. So I'm so happy.
No, thank you.
And I think after listening to your story, something I've learned is when you think about the harmful effects of the drug industry, you really only think about the addicts. And you think about the people who are addicted to drugs and how much harm that brings to them. And I've never really thought about the other end, the drug dealers. And, empathy and sympathy is never something I would have wanted to give them. But I think to fully understand the harm that the drug industry does, you need to understand it from every perspective. And you weren't addicted to drugs, but making it bigger, better. You would go to jail and then come out thinking, I'm not changing. In fact, I'm just going to make the business better so we don't get caught again. And it takes over your life, your family, your well-being, mental well-being, staying up for days, not taking care of yourself. So I think learning your story has helped me understand a more nuanced world and all the harms that drugs can bring to societies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's certain things that are changing, marijuana is being legalized now. And like, I just think if I would have not got caught, it was just weird. I got caught with marijuana dealing it back then, and that led me through to the spiral.
Yeah.
Because it was all like in one bucket.
Yeah.
Now that it's separated, that is different. Oh, you could do weed, you could, and it's okay. Back then it was just like, if I smoked weed, my mom thought I had the devil in me. Especially like Dominican moms, they had like
my grandmother's Mexican would be the same.
Oh, they had like the Santeria come through. You know what I mean? And they thought they were gonna bring the
groups
devil
all day for yourself. For the people who are listening, you should also be watching this on YouTube, but we are holding So Good smoothies, and I want to end with a little toast. I want to thank you so much for joining and for being such an inspiration. I first found out about you 3 years ago when my sister took your class, and she's like, Lexi, this is the hardest class you will ever do. You need to come. And it took me 3 years to build up the nerve. And I've come 2 weeks in a row. So I love it. And
I appreciate it.
We're a company dedicated to making positive contributions in our society and in our environment through things as small as snacks, smoothies, and stories that people tell. What words do you have to give to viewers on actions you can take today to start changing your life for the better?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is changing your perception. If you don't like something, but you've never tried it, try it. If you don't like somebody that's formerly incarcerated, like, because in the media has always been like, this person is a locked up predator or, whatever, an animal, so like try to speak to that individual or try to meet somebody that's been in that space, and you might change your perspective. You might be like, oh, this person's not that bad. And that's the whole goal of what we do at CONBODY, is to really try and change that perception of what we see formerly incarcerated people, who they are, whether they committed a violent crime or a nonviolent crime. I think people are redeemable. And it's like, when you look at something like your vegetables as a kid, you're like, oh, it looks disgusting, but you never tried it. And once you try it, you're like, oh, it's not that bad,
So come to CONBODY. He's not that bad. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Lexi. Yes, cheers.